Recorded live from a pub in a Christmassy Birmingham, welcome to Bible After Hours. This is a podcast series all about the Bible, what it's all about, and is it worth reading? My name is Luke Ollie, and I think the Bible is well worth a read, whether you're a Christian or not. But I'm no expert on it, and there's lots I could learn. Luckily, I know a few people who are far more knowledgeable than me, so I thought I'd record a podcast series in a local pub to give me an excuse to hang out with these guys and ask them lots of questions over a drink. And to make it more fun, we've got an audience. Yay! And because we're recording this when it's nearly Christmas, we've actually got quite a lot of decorations around the place, some tinsel, which I think is still from the 80s, actually.
It's definitely giving me 80s vibes.
Yeah.
In a really good way.
I have a Christmas tree behind me, which again, I moved it over to where it is, and I nearly sneezed with all the dust that came off it. So again, that's probably from the 80s. Still
you think the dust is actually from the 80s?
Yeah, I think so.
They've gone that far in decorating, they've got antique dust.
I think I've inhaled asbestos. I think it's possibly an issue. And in fact, I'm wearing a Christmas jumper because we're recording on the official Christmas jumper day. Becky, are you wearing a Christmas jumper?
I'm not. I'm wearing something green, but I washed my Christmas jumper this morning, which doesn't... Yeah, it's now wet, so that's not very helpful.
Okay.
Just to say, I do think I'm enjoying the pub vibe. I'm enjoying the warmth today.
Yeah, we have heating today, which is good.
We do have heating, and I don't think we do have asbestos. I think if people came down and joined us for a drink, they'd be more than safe.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah.
Don't sniff the Christmas tree, but that's just good policy anyway.
So if you've not had the opportunity to listen to any of our first two sessions, then do please check it out. We covered the meaning of life, as well as an overview of the whole Bible. So just a few small topics to start off with. If you want to quickly and easily get your hands on a Bible, plus a whole lot of guides completely for free, then download the Bible app and you can follow along during our sessions and explore whenever you're free for a moment. Or ask Santa for a real Bible, maybe.
Are we going to talk about Santa? Is that what today's about? Because I have not prepared.
I think we're going to skirt around the Santa topic today, mainly. It's always nice to have a Bible in your hand, though, when you want to take notes and highlight bits on the side, that kind of stuff. Now, as always, there are 3 house rules. We ask everyone who are listening to our podcast and anybody in the room. Firstly, we know yourself. Appreciate that we all come with preconceptions and backgrounds and hang-ups, so be aware of that. And if it's possible, try it and come with an open mind. Secondly, none of us know it all, so hopefully we can all learn together. And finally, don't shoot the messenger. Let's be kind and have some fun. So, is everybody happy with the rules of the game? Great stuff. So we are going to play. Tonight is about the Bible and our value, and it's about a Christmas story, hence the decorations and all the Christmas chat already. We're looking at possibly the greatest story ever told, I think. In the first half, we'll try and separate out the fact from the fiction. And in the second half, we will dig a little deeper into what the actual story means to us nowadays. Before we go any further, I was going to introduce my wonderful assistant tonight, Becky, but she's kind of already said hello in her way. But hello, Becky.
Hello. You did ask me if I was wearing a Christmas jumper.
I did, yeah. You are here. In fact, you've been here before. You were here for our first session, so thank you for coming back again.
It's great to be here.
Yeah, I thought you were good enough to try again.
Thanks. I think that's probably going to be written in a lot of my school reports, to be honest, as well, if you look back.
So you're going to be, as you are in Dictionary Corner this time, you're going to be taking questions from the audience throughout the night. So any of the audience want to do anything, go on Slido and they can ask questions as they go along. We are also running a few polls, and in fact we have a Christmas quiz. We thought we'd start off with a quiz this time. We've not done this before, so we'll see how the technology works, but we have got the audience to answer just a few questions beforehand to see if they're good with their knowledge about Christmas. And Becky, you have the results of those. So let's go through what the questions were and let's see what the answer was and how many people got that right. So what was the first question, Becky?
Okay, well, the first question was, which Gospels speak of the events surrounding Christ's birth? So the Gospels being those first 4 books of the New Testament, yes. Matthew, Mark, Luke and John, that are essentially biographies of Jesus written from different people's points of view. And the question, you could have Matthew and Luke Luke only, not you, Luke the Bible
Yes,
writer.
yes,
No.
this is important to
Mark
point
and
out.
John, or all of them, Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John. So we had a couple of people voted for all four. A couple of people voted for Matthew and Luke. That was the winner. No one voted for the other one. So we can reveal the answer. I can't do a drum roll. Can anyone do a drum roll?
Yeah, well done, one person in the
No
audience.
expense has been spared there on the drums.
And the answer is, well, I can reveal that it was Luke and Matthew, right? As the first.
It's
the
Luke
first
and
answer.
Matthew. That's right. Yeah.
Yes.
So,
So if you were listening at home and you got that one, well done. So that was the first question. How many people got that one right? Sorry, how many was that?
86% of people
Oh,
got
strong
that right.
for within the room. Okay. And what was the second question then, Becky?
The second question was, according to most English translations, where is Christ when the Magi come to visit him? So you might know the Magi as the three kings.
Yes.
I won't sing the song, but most of us might know that.
Yeah. You don't want to sing the song? Okay, fine.
No. And I think the options were, was he in the manger, in the womb, in a house, or what was the other option?
I don't know.
A kit, or something like that, yes. So there was other option.
Yes.
And
the answer was, drum roll, from nobody. It was a house, right?
it was in a house, that's right. So
Yeah.
is that correct? Excellent. So 75% of people got that right. Well done. Some scattered clapping there. People are excited.
75%.
75%.
Okay.
Okay, question 3 then. In a dream, an angel tells Joseph to name his child Jesus, as it was prophesied that a virgin would give birth and call her son Emmanuel. What does Emmanuel mean? Jesus saves, God is born, God is flesh, or God is with us? And actually, 100% of people got this correct, that God is with us.
Oh, well done, everybody. Okay, so that's the third question. Fourth question is...
Question 4, Christ was laid in a manger. What is a manger? A feeding trough, a type of inn, a barn, or a cave.
Okay.
And actually, 100% of people said it was a feeding trough.
Oh, well done, everybody.
Yeah, absolutely right. It's wrong. Ooh, our first of the
Okay, we'll
evening.
talk about that later,
That's
Phil.
exciting.
Hold yourself
so
back.
So 100% of people got the normal answer that's wrong.
Okay,
Correct.
all right.
Okay.
Controversial already.
Brilliant,
And
all
then
right.
what's the final one?
And then finally, the Bible tells us Jesus was born in December.
True or false?
True or false? Straight up true or false question. What do you reckon, Luke? True or false?
Well, I think I'm going to say that's false. It's got to
Yes, it's
be.
false. Yeah, it is indeed false. Absolutely.
Yes, indeed. And did everybody get that one right?
Yeah, do you know what? Everyone did get that one right.
Good.
Actually.
Nobody fell for that
Great.
one. Okay, brilliant. Right, so that was the quiz. Hopefully those at home, you were able to follow along and see if you got the right questions. And now I think it's time we bring on our first guest. He's already been heckling us, so I think we need to bring him on and let him speak for himself. So our first guest this evening is Phil Gresham. Please come up, Phil. We'll give you a big welcome. Brilliant. So, good evening, Phil, and welcome to Bible After Hours.
Hello, thanks for having me.
Pleasure. So, Phil, you are one of our regular attendees of the church that I go to. And we sometimes get the pleasure of hearing you do the odd talk. So I've been keen to get you on here since we started. So thanks for joining us tonight. But your experience does go well beyond the odd talk at church. So firstly, I guess it'd be good to hear just a little bit about who you are, what do you do, and what's been your life journey. Let's keep it relatively short on the life journey point, but it'd be great to know, some of those things.
It's always difficult to know how far to go back, but just shut me up when you've had enough. So I became a Christian when I was 19 years old. I don't come from a Christian family, so that was all quite new to me. I almost became a Jehovah's Witness, but didn't. And then I ended up going to a local church, asking lots of questions, and et voila, I knelt in someone's front room and gave my life to God, and it's the best thing I've ever done.
Oh, brilliant. I'm glad you said you knelt in somebody's front room. I thought you were going to say you knelt in something. Or
No.
Okay, great. Okay, fine. And so what do you do with yourself now, Phil? What keeps you busy?
So my background is in missions, overseas missions. So I started off, I did 2 years in Kenya, working with the church out there. I came back and went to Moorlands College, where I met my wife. And then together we went out to West Africa for 3 years, again working with the church out there. And then when I came back, I got into theological education. And so for the last 20 years, for various different Bible or theological colleges, I've been teaching all sorts of different things.
Okay, you sound like the right sort of guy we can have a talk about the Christmas story to then. We're going to dive straight in. And the Christmas story, I guess, for most people, it's probably quite a cliche. You know, there is the nativity scene, and everybody sort of did it when they were in primary school. So I guess people are probably familiar with the story, but it would be good just for us to give a brief overview of what it is and where is it in the Bible. So, where do you actually find the nativity story?
Yeah, so as with the quiz, it's in Matthew's Gospel, the first couple of chapters, and Luke's Gospel, the first couple of chapters there as well.
Okay. I guess first thing for me is why is it only in 2 of the Gospels? And there's obviously 4 Gospels, and some of them just don't touch on the birth bit at all, which is a surprise because it's quite, we see it as quite an important story, but obviously they did or didn't. Why particularly those 2?
So Mark is the shortest gospel, and he just goes straight into the action. So he begins with Jesus' ministry, and then we go from there. And then John's gospel is the last one to be written, and he doesn't talk about the birth in terms of mangers and shepherds and whatever, but he goes right the way back to the beginning. So in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, the Word was God. So he takes us right back before creation, and then kind of we move on through the story after that.
Right. Okay. All right. That makes sense. So I think as we are doing a Bible study and it is Christmas, I feel like we should have a little bit of the Christmas story. So what should we read? What part of it?
So either in Matthew or Luke. I prefer Matthew because it's my favourite gospel, but we can have a look at Luke if you want to.
Yeah. Okay. I think there's Luke. What is it? Luke 2. And Becky, you've got part of it. We're not going to read the whole thing because I think we have to discuss some of this stuff as well. So, but what bit have you chosen to read, Becky?
Oh, I think we're going to read the start of Luke chapter 2. So at that time, the Roman Emperor Augustus decreed a census should be taken throughout the Roman Empire. This was the first census taken when Quirinius was governor of Syria. All returned to their ancestral towns to register for this census. And because Joseph was a descendant of King David, he had to go to Bethlehem in Judea, David's ancient home. He travelled there from the village of Nazareth in Galilee. He took with him Mary, to whom he was engaged, who was now expecting a child. And while they were there, the time came for her baby to be born. She gave birth to her firstborn son. She wrapped him snugly in strips of cloth and laid him in a manger, because there was no lodging available for them.
Great. I mean, it's such a familiar story, isn't it? And that's just the first part of it. But let's get into that nativity scene then. So we all kind of have that image in our heads of the Christmas story, the donkey going along the road. In fact, my daughter is just about to play the donkey in Nativity. So we are very much part of that story at the moment, living it and breathing it in our house. And lots of songs. No mention of songs in that story so far, actually, but I'm sure there might be a song or 2 somewhere along the way, but maybe not the ones that my daughter's singing, possibly. But it'd be good to sort of look at different elements of that nativity and see, sort of stress test it. In your experience, Phil, what you think would be sort of still appropriate in first century Israel, and what bits maybe, I guess there might be some bits that have been embellished or added to, I guess, over the last couple of centuries. And other Victorians are pretty good at adding to stories on these sort of things. So you heckled us on the manger point straight away. So let's start with there. So we sort of described the manger as a sort of a feeding trough. Is there other definitions that could be said of what a manger could be?
So it's not a feeding trough, it's a water trough.
Okay, fair enough. Fine. So presumably there was no water in it at the time?
No. But you see, the thing is, it wasn't a wooden manger with straw in it. It was a stone manger, and hundreds of these have been found up and down Israel. And it would have been used for water, for watering the animals. They come in different heights, whether you've got a small animal or a tall animal. But it says about the cloths. So in the manger would have been put cloths, and then Jesus was wrapped in cloths. So actually it would have been quite a nice place to be.
It makes more sense, though, because when you have this picture of a little manger where a baby sort of is in, then I think about sort of cows and donkeys or whatever eating out of it. When you feed a cow or a donkey, they have these massive troughs with huge amounts of hay, and they clearly wouldn't fit in a baby-sized manger. Now, I guess a trough of water would be smaller and probably more obvious to put a child in. So yeah, that kind of makes sense to me.
Yeah, much smaller. And I think there's also imagery there. So Jewish people love to have lots of images, metaphors, those sorts of things. So in the birth story, you have Jesus who's wrapped in cloth and placed in a stone enclosure. And of course, when he dies, he's wrapped in cloths and he's put in a stone enclosure there as well.
Oh, okay, yeah, nice. I've never thought like that before, but yeah, that makes sense.
I feel like there's something about that makes it like it connects it then to the death and resurrection of Jesus, but that's not often where we go with Christmas, and they can be a bit
separate stories, aren't they?
And,
Yeah, brilliant. Okay, all right. So first factual point made on that one then, I guess. So in my head, I've got the nativity scene, and in there, obviously, you've got Mary and Joseph and the manger we've discussed. Usually, that's about it, right? They're kind of on their own and sort of dealing with his birth. And if I was Joseph and trying to help my wife give birth on their own, was he known? Were carpenters well known for helping wives give birth here? Would he have been there on his own doing that?
Well, so first of all, he wasn't a carpenter, so we need to pick up on that point.
Okay.
So in Greek, he's a tekton, which means he's a craftsman, and usually that word means builder. So in the Septuagint, which is the Greek translation of the Hebrew text, which predates Jesus, it's for the stonemasons who actually built the first temple. So, so he didn't work in wood; he worked in stone.
You are okay. That's that. I mean, I can hear people shocked and shouting at the podcast as we are talking. Okay, so he's not okay. He's not a carpenter.
But let me answer your question.
Yeah.
But before that, let me just go back slightly, because I'm not here to destroy the story of Christmas. But what we found is that from 2,000 years ago and 1,000 miles away, that story has progressed into our culture in a way which is now, it looks very European and it looks very modern.
Yes.
So I've got my crib sheet here. Lee Strobel, he writes, the Middle Ages have contaminated the biblical story. So basically, we have to go back through the Middle Ages all the way back to the first century. That's very hard for us to do. So the art that we see, even the carols that we sing, so many of the things around Christmas don't come out of first century Israel. They come out of Europe in the last 500-600 years.
Are you meaning to say that Mary is not white?
She's not, no.
I have to say, having tried this year to find a nativity set that's historic, it's very difficult to do, because I think actually you can find them from lots of different cultures. We've actually got a South American one that one of our family brought back from Peru for us, which is very lovely, and everyone looks Peruvian. And then we've got another one brought for us by some American family, and everyone looks, white Anglo-Saxon Protestant. But we're actually trying to find one that's historically accurate. It's very, very difficult. Is that, people sort of make them in their own image, I suppose, and do something that looks familiar to them. How do you think that's helpful? Can it be harmful? Is it okay? Like how can we navigate that really well as people who want to be biblical and historical?
Yeah, I don't think it's harmful. I think our emphasis is in the wrong place. So we often talk about, so Jesus was born in Bethlehem, and you've got shepherds and angels and various other things going on, and then we kind of get caught up with those things, where actually Jesus is born, full stop. That's the focus of the biblical story, but because he's a small person in a big story, that we kind of focus on the donkeys and the shepherds and all of these other things. But actually, it's not about the date; it's about God being with us. So Emmanuel. So in Greek, it's with us, God. That's why you got the L on the end, and that's really, or it should be, the focus. It should be the emphasis of what we're looking at. So it's not that those things are inconsequential, but actually when we start talking about those things, we miss the whole point of what the gospel writers, at least I think, were trying to get across. This amazing, incredible news that God made flesh, born as a human baby, that would have blown people's minds.
Yeah, absolutely, and we'll go into that in more detail in a minute. So we have the nativity story. Is Joseph on his own? Or is he with other people, do you think? Yeah,
so again, that's part of our individualistic Western culture. We see Mary and Joseph on their own, travelling down from Nazareth down to Bethlehem. It's about 18 to 90 miles, and you wouldn't make that trip on your own. And there's two reasons for that. First of all, Mary and Joseph are not married, So at this time in history, that would just be a complete no-no. But also, to make that sort of trip, you would be open to robbers and Romans and Samaritans and all sorts of other people. So it would be a massive group of people that would be traveling, because the census didn't just apply to Mary and Joseph, it applied to everyone.
Sure.
So people are moving around. But also going to Bethlehem, the whole point of the census is that Joseph is going home. He's going back to where his relatives are. He's going back to his place of birth, certainly historically. And therefore, there would have been lots of people to welcome them into the house. So yes, Mary being an unmarried mother, that would probably cause a few issues. But the laws of Middle Eastern hospitality would mean that she would always find a welcome somewhere. And then the aunts and the cousins and the grandmothers and whatever else, they would have been the birthing crew, that Joseph wouldn't have been anywhere around.
Yeah. Okay. All right. Well, I mean, that gives me hope that Jesus was born in a good way. I think
Absolutely.
Joseph's hands would have been quite rough, I think, and maybe not the first ones you'd want around a baby, possibly.
And I think that's really important, because sometimes we see them on their own, and it's kind of them against the world. And I've had people say to me, if God the Father was so disinterested in his son when he was born, how will they know that he will ever be interested in them?
Right.
But actually, God made sure that Jesus was born amongst family. He was cared for by family. He's brought up, and God the Father is very much in the middle of that story as well.
Yeah. Okay.
So what's that line then, Phil? Because in that Luke 2 verse 7 that we read, it said there was no lodging available for them. And I think we've always read that, so we put the innkeeper in there, which again, probably medieval England, like if it's quite fun to go around knocking on doors, oh, no room here, leave us alone. But actually, what you're saying is that's not saying that if you read it in a historical kind of context in its first language. That's not.
Yeah, so pandiochion would be an inn where you paid to stay. That's not the word that we've got in Luke 2. It's actually the word kataluma, which means somebody's guest room. So Joseph and Mary would have gone to to a relative's house. There's no room in the guest room. So Judean houses were built on 2 levels. The people lived upstairs, the animals lived downstairs. So there's no room in the guest room upstairs, so they moved downstairs. But, let's give them some credit. They would have cleared it out. The animals would have been moved out the way. And then Mary would have given birth there amongst family again.
Okay, yeah, that sounds a little bit more pleasant than maybe the view that we have. But I want to finish off the nativity scene and see how we go. And so the next characters that we meet are the shepherds. So they come along, and in fact, just a little bit later in the bit that Becky read in Luke 2, they're the ones that are visited by the angels, and then they come and see what's going on. So are we good with that? They feel like it's quite a good part of the story.
Shepherds, yes. I think part of our misconception here is we often picture 40, 50-year-old bearded men running around down to Bethlehem. But actually, all the shepherding done at that time was done by teenagers or less, or younger, I should say. So, and actually, a lot of them were girls.
Okay.
So what we should probably picture is teenage girls and some teenage boys rushing to Bethlehem to see the birth of this child. That would be a much closer thing. So in our nativity stories, we have girls dressed up as angels and boys dressed up as shepherds. It would actually be closer to the text if we swap that round, because all the language of angels in those birth stories, they're about warriors, it's about military terms, it's about fighting. And when they arrive, they don't sing, they say, and then they give this announcement.
Yep.
And for the girls, like I said, it would be better if they actually dressed up in angels to be more biblically accurate.
Okay, so it was the young within the communities that would be looking after the sheep. Presumably, it's a pretty low value activity. So yeah, I mean, in fact, we're not King David, which is a character in the Old Testament, was a shepherd, and he was the youngest in his family, and presumably a teenager when he was.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
similar
definitely.
kind of thing going on there. Okay, that makes sense. And finally, we have the Magi. In fact, this was covered off in the quiz. So the answer, when did the Magi visit the Jesus or where? So the answer was in a house. Indeed. Rather than in any manger. So why is this the case? Because in my nativity at home, I have the kings, all there, 3 kings, obviously, all there ready to go in the manger. So is that, I'm assuming that's not accurate?
Not at all, unfortunately. First of all, we've no idea how many there were. We think 3 because there were 3 gifts, but there could have been, and probably were, a lot more than that. Kings, they definitely weren't. They're called magi, which is kind of counselors to leaders and people in authority. But the big mistake that we make is bringing the magi into the Christmas story. So they probably came at least a year, if not 18 months later. So when they come to the house, it's to see the child, and that's what it says in Greek. It's not to see the baby. And that word for child, paidion, is relevant to toddlers and older. So when Herod gets really upset and he says to people that he wants to kill all the babies, kill all the children rather, it's up to 2 years old and younger. Well, why does he say 2 years old? Because he's working on the dates that the Magi have given to him. So they're not actually looking for babies, they're looking for toddlers.
Yeah, okay. All right, so we've... the nativity scene would look a little bit different if we did it more historically accurate.
Indeed.
But it's super interesting to sort of, we have that image, and I think it's a great one to have in our heads. But it maybe the value of what could have been is really nice to be able to sort of flesh it out and actually see maybe how Jesus was actually born. And in fact, it'd be interesting to sort of move on a little bit. So Jesus was we could talk about as Christians Jesus as being the Messiah. And in fact, the Jews at the time were expecting a Messiah to be born. In fact, that's why Herod, when they talk about the prophecies that were being given at the time, and there's prophecies around where a king might be born, and that's how Herod went and sort of killed all those children in the area that it was prophesied for. But did the Jews at the time, were they expecting a Messiah to be born in this way? What were they actually expecting from a Messiah, and what did they get?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think part of the trouble is there was no one view of what this was going to look like. So people had all sorts of different ideas about the Messiah. So it goes all the way back to, look at my notes, Genesis 3:15, which reads, "He will crush your head and you will strike his heel." That's in the singular. It's talking about someone. And so this idea developed that there would be someone who would come and would be really special. And then when King David comes, that idea is picked up again. And then when you get to the prophets, they're beginning to think that someone is going to arrive, possibly like David, son of David. And then in the intertestamental period, so the bit between the end of the Old Testament and the beginning of the New Testament, this really begins to take shape. But people had lots of different ideas. So some people spoke about 2 different messiahs, one that would suffer, and that was the Messiah, son of Joseph, and one that would be a victorious king, and that's the Messiah, son of David. Some thought this person would be divine. Some people thought it was merely a human. Lots of different ideas going on, but certainly the idea that this person would be born in such poverty, in such humble circumstances, would not have been on their radar.
Right. So when Jesus comes along and starts talking about being the Son of God, and all the Jews at the time in that community, it's a relatively close-knit community. They would have known him from very young. They would have known that his mother had conceived out of wedlock. They would have known his story, and when he starts coming along and saying that he's doing miracles and things, that would have presumably come as a shock, but also they would have maybe not seen him as the obvious candidate.
Yeah, absolutely, because although he's born in Bethlehem, he grows up in Nazareth, and just like in the UK, he would then have had a northern accent, which meant that if the Messiah is going to be born in Bethlehem, surely he should have a southern accent. So he doesn't sound right, he doesn't look right, he doesn't do the things that they were expecting a Messiah to do. So he's completely shifting their expectations and their perceptions of all sorts of different things. Those that were open to it began to believe that this really was the Messiah, and of course those that were closed to it had lots of reasons for doing so.
Yeah, I can imagine. So why, if Jesus was the Son of God, which we're gonna work along that premise,
Indeed.
And if you were God and you decided to send down your Son to earth, it feels like there's many options that would be available to you to do that. And the one that he took feels different than maybe that you and I would have chosen. Why did it go that way? Why was Jesus born in that manner? Couldn't he have been born in in a villa, a Roman villa somewhere, maybe in a castle, and born to a king. And that would have maybe made the whole thing a lot easier to sort of sell, wouldn't it?
I think all the way through Jesus' ministry, you see him identifying with people. So he could have been born in a fortress, he could have been born in a palace, he could have been born in the temple, but he wasn't. But he's out there amongst the common people. That's the ones that he's engaging with, but he's identifying all the way through. So he gets baptized. Why does he need to get baptized? He hasn't done anything wrong, right. But he's identifying with people, and all the way through you can see those links going back and forth. And his heart, God's heart, is for the outcasts, those on the fringes of society, those that can't fend for themselves, the orphan, the widows. We read all about that in the Old Testament. Mm-hmm. And Jesus comes to those people particularly. You know, he says in Matthew's Gospel, I haven't come to those who don't think they need me. I've come for the sick. I've come for those who recognize that they need a saviour. I've come for those that are searching after truth. And you see that all the way through.
Right. Right, and presumably his birth ticked off quite a lot of different prophecies that were in the Old Testament. So I guess that may have narrowed down the choices where he could have been. Yeah. So
Micah says that he's going to be born in Bethlehem, and he obviously was. But then I've said about the northern accent, so people didn't think he was from Bethlehem. But there's lots of other prophecies about this person, this really special person who's going to be born. He's going to be called Wonderful Counselor, Mighty God, Everlasting Father, Prince of Peace. Those are pretty high titles. Mm. And this person is going to do incredible things. So the Jewish people said that when the Messiah comes, there's certain signs that he's going to do that only the Messiah could do. And they were things like raising the dead. Well, we know that he did that. Healing from a distance. We know that he did that. Healing someone born blind. We know that he did that. And the list goes on. So he's ticking all the boxes. Mm-hmm. So again, if you were open to it, then people were believing in who Jesus was. But if you were close to it, for lots of different reasons, as there are today, then you weren't necessarily wanting to look and see this person was who he said he was.
Yeah. And to finish off this half of the process, it'd be interesting. What would have Bethlehem looked like at the time? Have you been there? Was there a local mansion that he could have potentially been born in? I guess was it heavily Roman occupied? I'm assuming. You know what would it have come across as?
Yeah, no, I haven't been there. I've been to Israel numerous times. But it's in the occupied territories, so at the moment it's under the Palestinian authorities, right. Which means you can go there, but it takes a long time to get through the border, and then, of course, back again once you've finished. Yeah. So, but if you go back 2,000 years, it was only a village of about 500 people. It's about 5 miles from Jerusalem, 5 miles south. It wasn't on a main road. It really wasn't anywhere particularly. It was quite small, but because it was David's town, that's where David was born and brought up. Then right. It had some resonance and it had some status to it.
Okay, but yeah, I mean, it's a very small dwelling, really. 500 people would have been, very small. Okay, we will finish it. We'll take a short break there, Phil. That's been really helpful to sort of bring that story to life. So we're going to take a pause here, and then we're going to bring in our second guest in a minute. Hello and welcome back, everybody. Yes, right. We are back onto the Christmas story, and during the break, we ran a question, Becky, with the audience. So it'd be good to know how that went. What was the question that we asked them? The
question was, "What is the meaning of Christmas to you?"
Yes, very deep.
It was very deep and meaningful. I mean, you only gave people 4 options. Like I said, none of them were songs. So I feel like we've missed a moment there of being. It's all right. It's all right.
I didn't want you to sing, if I'm honest.
Who does? Let's face it. Okay, so we had "It Has No Meaning," a time to be with friends and family, good excuse to spend lots of money, and to remember Jesus being born.
Okay, and I think I gave people multiple choice answers here. So
you did. So yes, 140% of people voted, okay. Which even with my mathematical brain is terrifying. Yeah. But no one said it was a good excuse to spend lots of money. So everyone's been very thrifty this year. Clearly, we did have 57% of votes. Time to remember Jesus being born, but 86% of votes were a time to be with friends and family.
Yeah. Okay. Nice. Yeah. Well, it definitely is that, isn't it? But I'd say it's arguably both.
You'd have gone for both, would you?
I think so, yeah.
You're in
I'd
that
probably tick both
140%
boxes.
audience that would go for both there.
I think so. Right, okay, now we have our second guest with us, in fact. So I'd like to welcome Kat to Bible After Hours. Yeah! It's good to have you along, Kat. Hello.
Thank you for having me.
So I've known you for many years, but we don't often get the chance to share a drink. So this is our opportunity, and particularly at the moment, you have a very young child. So getting you out of the house, we are very grateful for you to be here. Thank you.
This is my first evening out since
Oh,
he
wow.
was born, so thank you. I've
Yeah.
made it to a pub, which I feel like is a good start.
Yeah, and
Can only go up from here.
You got a meal as well, so you didn't.
I did.
Yeah,
I had a
were
very
able
nice
to-
curry. Yeah.
You didn't have any children sort of.
No,
harassing
I had a
you.
hot meal and I could eat it with both hands.
Yeah, so you have well treated tonight. That was your
It's been
Christmas
good.
treat from us, and you do have a Christmas jumper on, which
I
is
do.
very appropriate. Which
I mean, spoiler, it's not actually mine. I borrowed it because I realised I didn't have one. I'd thrown it out in a clear out passed it on to a charity shop and they throw things out.
Phil, you don't have one. Why not?
I didn't get the memo.
Oh, okay, fair enough. So, Kat, other than being a mother, what do you do with your time as well?
Currently, that is what I do with
Fair
my
enough.
time.
It's quite busy.
But until 3 months ago, I was also being a GP 3 days a week. So that's what I get paid to do.
Yeah. Okay. Brilliant. I know you often do talks in our church as well,
Yes.
and various other things.
Yeah, I do.
So it's good to have you along, and it's good to get your take on what the Christmas story is all about. Now, obviously, you having a young child, you have recently been pregnant, so it'd be good to get your sort of thoughts on having gone through that journey as well. So my first question to you is: have you ever ridden a donkey whilst pregnant? No.
No, that's a horrible thought.
Yeah.
We were on a beach holiday in August while I was very heavily pregnant, and the kids went on donkey rides, but I stayed
passed.
well clear of the donkey.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, never mind. So.
Did we hear that Mary also stayed well clear of donkeys?
I think we got to that point earlier.
about
Actually.
Did we?
Did
I
we hear
don't
there
know,
was no
Phil.
donkey?
Can you confirm or deny whether or not a donkey was involved?
Well, I wasn't there, but I think we can be pretty sure that she stayed well clear.
Yeah.
I was reading a quote the other day, and the guy said that having a donkey back then was like us having a Mercedes now.
Really?
So it was really for the rich. And when you look at the Old Testament, you see it's leaders and kings and governors that ride donkeys. So, yeah, sorry, no donkey either.
Yeah. All right. Okay. Well, that's going to land heavily on my daughter, who's currently doing
The
it.
kids
Don't tell
listening
her,
to this
don't tell her.
podcast are crying.
Yeah. All right. Well, so, Kat, I guess firstly, with your recent experience of becoming a mother, does that give you any additional insight into the Mary story and the whole Christmas story as well?
I mean, thankfully, my experience of giving birth was not what hers was. I mean, obviously, like Phil was saying earlier, it was into the context of extended family and community. I think there's this weirdness, isn't there? Because she knew who this baby was. This wasn't just her baby. This was the Son of God. And so there's this thing in me of, mothering is not glamorous in the early, well, possibly at any stage, but certainly in the early days, you've got this tiny human being who's completely dependent on you.
Right.
You've been up half the night with them. You've changed a lot of nappies. They've sicked down the third dress in a row. You've got changed multiple times, and that's just you, not the baby. You just there's this split thing that I imagine Mary thinking of. I know who you really are, but I just wish you'd go to sleep, because I can't imagine he was the perfect baby in that sense. Like, he would have been a human baby.
I think he would have cried.
Yeah, I think so. No crying he makes. I don't think so. I think Away in a Manger had it wrong.
Yeah, possibly so.
So I think there's that.
We're destroying a lot of myths.
We
today.
are. We're getting rid of the Christmas
I feel
carols.
like you
as
sing
well.
that line at the kid next to you, don't you? Not your kid, but the kid behind you that's making a horrible noise. You're like,
Yeah. No
Yeah.
crying
What
does he
line's
make, i.e. you.
yeah,
Yes,
with your eyes on.
shush. So I think there's that, and I think there's just this extra level of not incredulity, but just amazement that God would choose not to, come as Zeus with the thunderbolt or Thor with the hammer, but as a very vulnerable, dependent human being, like this little 3-month-old that I've got. Literally can't do anything. He doesn't realise that he has, or he's just discovering that his hands belong to him at the moment. There's like, oh my goodness, I have hands. He can't do anything. He needs us to do everything for him, and that God would choose to come like that. I think it's incredible. It just shows us I think the value that God places on motherhood, which feels good, if I'm honest, because there are moments at 3 a.m. where you're thinking, what am I doing? Have I done anything today? I haven't even showered, I haven't brushed my teeth. But that God trusts a woman, a family, to raise and take care of his son, I think is just incredible.
Yeah, I can see that. And the idea of sort of God being in this physical form, I guess, is something that, you know, we all now take for granted. It's just part of the story, right? But I wonder, Phil, whether or not at that point in time in history, was that a common idea, or was it something that was quite revolutionary at the time?
Well, as I was saying earlier, there were lots of different ideas, but there was almost the sense that this person would appear fully formed and then kick out the Romans, which is what they wanted. So this idea of actually being a baby and all of that kind of stuff, wasn't really in their thinking. I mean, if they thought about it, if you've got a human being who's going to do all of these things and they have to be born at some point, but they were simply expecting that the Messiah would arrive and do all of these incredible things. So that vulnerability that Kat's just talked about, that wouldn't have been in their thinking at all.
Right, yeah, because I guess I'm thinking of other religions at the time. The Romans and the Greeks, I guess, were around. Their gods are not sort of human in the sense that we would consider being human, right? There's an invincibility about them, other humanness about them. But Jesus, as you're saying, there's a real humanness about his story and about who he is in those early days, which is really interesting to see. Yeah. So we're saying that his coming in that human form is a first revelation of what that story can be all about. And I guess it would be interesting to sort of be Mary, having to sort of touch and be part of that experience, that physical touch of who he is and experiencing him as he's growing up. And I guess a lot of the people around him would have known him. He had brothers and things over time, and would have known him very much as a person in that way. So reflecting on sort of reflecting on the sort of things that Phil talked about earlier, and the sort of the people that were involved, and particularly in those early stages, we have shepherds who are young people, and maybe people that we weren't necessarily expecting. What's your takeaway from that sort of story? How does that what takeaways do you have from that?
I think the more you consider the Christmas story, and the more you hear somebody like Phil talk about it with that context there, the more you go, this is a really familiar story to us, but actually God uses really surprising ways of doing things and surprising people in a way that I think maybe we've lost sight of a little bit. So the fact that he chooses, like I said, Mary, this young girl from an out-of-the-way village, she's not rich, he gets born into a people group that are oppressed, just all of those things they're not the scenario you'd choose if you wanted to create a situation where this person would have influence and power and prestige, which is what we'd think of if you want somebody important, you give them those things. And the same with the shepherds. Girls didn't have the same, they were second-class citizens in that culture to men, women and men. And, they had a job that wasn't well paid, it wasn't well thought of. It just all says to me that God writes people into this story who are not going to be included in other ways. And it speaks to me of a God who wants to draw people in. And in fact, actually, Becky, would you mind looking up Luke 2, the message that the angels bring? There's one particular line about, this is a message of great joy for all the people.
So it's Luke chapter 2, and then... when the angels are on the hillside, is that right?
Yeah, that's the bit they say to the shepherds.
Right, the shepherds are on the hillside, as we know, all these young teenagers and younger. And the angels come and they say, don't be afraid, which I love is always what the angels say first off. So angels must look quite terrifying, unlike the children in the nativity play.
Yeah, absolutely.
They say, I bring you great good news that will bring great joy to all people. The Saviour, yes, the Messiah, the Lord, has been born today in Bethlehem, the city of David. And you will recognise him by this sign. You will find a baby wrapped snugly in strips of cloth lying in a manger.
Yeah, so I think the thing that stands out to me is that from the people that God writes into this story, and from what the angels very explicitly say, they say this is for all people. And I think almost like the strapline of our culture at the moment is, you do you, it's fine for you, it's not for me. And I think sometimes we can write ourselves out of actually, yes, you get a choice about whether you want to join in with this, but God's invitation is, this is for everyone. This is not just for the wealthy, for those who've got it sorted, for those who've got the right background. This is fling wide the gates for everyone. Everyone's welcome. And it doesn't actually matter where you come from or what your story is. You're included and you're invited. And
we see that right through Jesus' story, don't we? But
yeah, massively.
Clearly right from the beginning, that message is there.
He gets into
right?
big trouble for hanging out with all sorts of people that people thought were not fitting or unsavoury or had a bit of a reputation about them. And actually that's not just the Christmas story, that's the whole of his life. He just lived like boundaries didn't matter. And they didn't to him. There weren't any lines in the way. His mission was, I need to make sure that everybody knows that they're loved and welcome. Yeah.
So, I mean, if we're looking at sort of God's presence on earth, and he's trying to, in that, articulate how his view of humans, isn't he, really, in that story? And we see that all the way through the Jesus story, but in this particular moment, it's right from the beginning, he's showing how God values humanity and the individuals involved in that story, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think they're questions that have been there since the dawn of time, and I think no matter how sorted, in inverted commas, your life looks, I think everyone has that sense of, am I valuable? Am I lovable? Am I worth loving? Am I enough? And I think that's certainly something I come across in my day job, is that underpins a lot of the ways that people behave and the way they live life and the choices they make about themselves, is that sense of internal value, and looking to try and not bolster that exactly, but answer that question of, am I somebody who's worth loving?
Yeah, I mean, I expect as a GP you come across a lot of people who are ill in some form or another and want support in some form or another. And I guess it'd be interesting.
Some who just want to chat.
Yeah, how does that sort of play? Well, firstly, how does it play if you're a Christian and you're sort of seeing the message of Jesus and the value that he's putting on individuals of all types? Does that influence how you act as a GP and how you sort of deal with people as they come through the door? I'm sure they're all beautiful, amazing people, but do you sort of does that influence you in any way?
Yeah, it does. I mean, part of the what would I call it? Part of the sort of professional code that I sign up to is that you treat everybody the same regardless of whatever characteristic they have. And I think that's easy to sign on the line and say, yes, I'll do that. It's actually very counter to our own human nature, because we all have people we connect with more than others, people we like more than others. And I feel like part of me following Jesus is going, God, would you help break those barriers in me? Would you help deal with the stuff that's in me that would stop me treating everybody as of equal value? And but that's part of what I think he's put me there for, is to reaffirm the value in each person by doing my job.
Sure.
Not by necessarily talking theology with everybody, but in terms of saying, look, you are a worthy person, you are a valuable person, no matter what life has thrown at you. I think people often walk in my door and they carry a story. And some of those people will have been through an upbringing, a childhood that has reaffirmed those things and gone, yes, I am worthy of being loved. Or they've tied them to go, I am valuable because I succeed in my career or I have a great marriage. And sometimes they come to me because actually when those things break or don't work, then their sense of value disintegrates. Or they've actually been through things in life that have given them the opposite message. And they go, well, I'm not valuable because I've experienced abuse or I've been through lots of relationships or whatever it might be. And equally then my job is to go, no, your value doesn't actually depend on those things, that I will sit and give you time and attention and care and compassion because you're human and because you're created by a God who loves you and thinks you're amazing.
Do you think that affects how people respect themselves, I guess, if you know you are valued and loved in some form or another? How does that impact people's health and well-being if they are coming to you and they feel undervalued? Is that affecting how they act and their health as well?
Yeah,
Or does it
hugely.
Right, okay. So
Yeah, I mean, that could be really obvious, can't it? I think we all know people who make destructive life choices or who pick ways of coping that don't treat themselves like they have value physically. I think most of us also do that with the way that we talk to ourselves internally, and that can have a knock-on effect in terms of our self-confidence, the things that we feel courageous enough to do, and then it sort of spills down the way you speak to other people as well. So yes, I think both in a very physical way and in terms of the voice that you talk to yourself with, the value that you place on yourself will affect both of those things.
It's good to hear how the Jesus story sort of helps to illustrate, just in that small little story about about the Son of God coming to earth, also how God sees us individually in that story, and each of us playing our own part, I guess, in that as well. Yeah, well, that's a brilliant illustration, Karen. I really appreciate you bringing that to us. I think we'll draw that to a close there. That's been a really interesting story, and appreciate Phil as well, you guiding us through what you think the Christmas story could potentially have looked like in those early days. And thank you everybody for coming along and listening to us. As we finish off, if you can follow us or rate us on any podcast platform, that would be great. That always helps us as we're developing this. This is our third episode, and we intend to come back in the new year in some form or another, so look forward to seeing you all then. And in fact, I am going to finish off in the Christmas story, because I thought, why not? We're kind of here, so let's read just a little bit more of the Christmas story to finish off for the evening. So here we go. This is Luke 2, verse 8 to 18. And this is the bit about the shepherds, which we didn't cover off before. So there were some shepherds in that part of the country who were spending the night in the fields taking care of their flocks. An angel of the Lord appeared to them, and the glory of the Lord shone over them, and they were terribly afraid. But the angel said to them, "Don't be afraid. I am here with good news for you, which will bring great joy to all the people. This very day in David's town your Saviour was born, Christ the Lord. And this is what will prove it to you. You will find a baby wrapped in strips of cloth and lying in a manger." Suddenly a great army of heaven's angels appeared with the angels, singing praises to God. "Glory to the God in the highest heaven, and peace on earth to those with whom he is pleased." And when the angels went away from them back into heaven, the shepherds said to one another, "Let's go to Bethlehem and let's see this thing that's happened, which the Lord has told us." And so they hurried off and found Mary and Joseph and saw the baby lying in the manger. And when the shepherds saw him, they told them what the angel had said about the child. And all who had heard were amazed at what the shepherds had said. Happy Christmas, everybody, and we will see you again in the new year.
Theme tune by Matt Parsons, produced by Luke Ollie.